Anyway, good morning again, everybody. Also, a special good morning to everybody who complimented my vest. You could say I'm invested in this lesson this morning. That will be my last dad joke, I promise. No more. But this morning, we'll be going back to Luke chapter 8 as we finish out the chapter. And if you want to be getting your Bibles out and flipping over there, I'm going to go ahead and pray for the lesson. Dear Heavenly Father, God, thank you for this morning that we can come and worship you. And God, I love thinking about how Jesus was the ultimate uncomfortable situation embracer. That God, he going to the cross, Lord, he did it to show us that, Lord, you would do anything for us. That God, we are worth even the blood of a God. And that God, that you are the kind of God that we're worshiping this morning, one that would go that far. I pray this morning as we go to your word and go to Luke, speak through it, God. Let us all leave here hearing exactly what you wanted us to hear. God, we love you. We ask this all in your son's name. Amen. And as you're getting there, be going to verse 40. And as you're kind of, making your way there, let's have a little story. If you don't know, my roommate and I, JC, recently there's been a resurgence of, a love for Thomas the Train in our household. We don't know why. Well, it's from a movie, but now we've gotten really deep into it. We've taken the personality quizzes to figure out who we are. I'm a Gordon, by the way, and so we're very deep. And so there's a couple nights ago. I guess if you don't know either, we actually have gone as far as investing in a book of Thomas stories that JC bought that we keep on display at our house now, but. The other night, he was sitting as I was sitting down writing this lesson, and he's just reading from the book. And some of these stories are pretty wild. I do recommend, if you haven't watched Thomas for a while, you should go look back at some of those stories. They're funny. But anyway, he was reading, and it was like we were just dying there laughing at these things. And it kind of struck me. I think it's hilarious that we just never outgrow stories. Like, we love them today. Think, what's your favorite movie or a TV show? Or a story or a book you read growing up. Think about some of the things in it that make it good, that you really like it. It could be the characters or character development. I always think of Zuko from Avatar. If there's any character who had just an amazing arc, it's Avatar: Last Airbender. Zuko was incredible. Or you think of a great quest. That there's an amazing quest to go on. I think of Lord of the Rings, where they had to go and destroy a ring, and there's the world's beyond hope, but they did it. Or Rocky, we're near Philly. That's near and dear to I think some people's hearts. The story of Rocky, this kind of guy that wasn't really the best boxer, but or maybe past his prime, but he went and defeated the champion of the world. Like these kind of stories, we love them. But most of them, they also include two major elements. You're going to have the hero, whether it's an underdog or someone who's washed up or someone you just don't expect much from. And then the second element, I guarantee all these stories you might be thinking of is also going to have is obstacles. In each one, there's challenge of some sort that comes up, an impossible feat that the hero then has to go and overcome. And I think we love these stories so much because we relate to them. We all have that. Like throughout our days, like none of us can be here this morning and say that we have not had an obstacle this week. Yeah. Or there was something that came up that we were legitimately tested. And if you're here and that hasn't happened to you, then it's coming. You're going to have one. Or you are the problem. You are somebody's obstacle. It's going to happen then. But leading up to where we're going in Luke, Luke is changing paces a bit. Luke is he's presenting Jesus in this really cool way through these last two stories we've looked at, where he's saying basically Jesus has mastery over every sort of area of life, whether it's nature. With just a word, he calms the storm. Or the demonic, that someone in the deepest, darkest has the most ridiculous spiritual problems. With just a word, Jesus can fix it. It's there. And in the story we're going to read this morning of Jairus, the synagogue leader, and the bleeding woman, we're going to meet two more characters. And what Luke is going to present to us is not only does Jesus have mastery over those two elements of life, but also sickness and death even itself. That these things, that Jesus is in complete control. So let's be going there. Let's go to Luke chapter 8, verse 40. And once you're there, I'll begin reading. And I'm actually going to take a sip. more water. And it says in verse 40, "Now, when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. And then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying." And so let's stop there. Jairus, he was a desperate man. Like, we can't think of a situation worse than this. His daughter was dying, and I think we have to notice a little bit, like Jairus, there is some faith here. Like, he left his daughter, who was in a bed, maybe even her last moments. He got up and went and searched for a solution. Like, imagine being in that scenario. I think that there's some real faith that Jairus did see something in Jesus, something special that maybe could have been the solution. So he tore himself away from his daughter and went, and he actually found him. He went, and Jesus was there, and so he fell at his feet, and Jesus agreed. And let's keep going. The next verse, "As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him." And I think we can all relate to that a little bit. We've all been somewhere like in a heavy crowd. Like, think like you're going into an amusement park, or and then they always have like this one tent where they check your bag, and like everybody has to get funneled. Like, we've been there before. Like, it's hot, it's claustrophobic, it's just uncomfortable in every single way, being closed up and close to people. And it's like you don't know who you're touching either. You're like, oh no. At least maybe I think about those things. It's like, But this is kind of the scenario that they're in this crowd, and so you imagine Jairus is like, oh, like, let's go. Like, this crowd's moving, and like they're probably not even walking. They might just be like waddling along, like, going at glacial pace. If I was Jairus, I would probably be pretty tempted to just like go on full linebacker, knock some people over, throw some bows, toss the bodies. Like, that's what I'd be tempted to do. And I think Luke is like, he's a master at building a dramatic scene. Like, and we're going to see this as we keep going, because as Jairus, who's this crazy, horrible day, just trying to get Jesus back to his house, this slow-moving crowd, things for Jairus are literally, and it's almost comedic, it's about to get so much worse for him. It's going to get ridiculous. Let's keep reading. Verse 43. "And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped." "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, people are crowding and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." Then the woman, seeing that she could no longer go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." So let's stop there. Let's back up a little bit. So imagine you're in the crowd, you're Jairus, you're just trying to get Jesus back. You want to throw bodies, you're still trying to be polite. And then all of a sudden, as you're already like walking really, really, really slow, Jesus goes, "Hold up, somebody touched me." Who did it? Who touched me? You can imagine Jairus is like, "What does it matter? We're all touching you, Jesus. Why are we stopping?" And he stops. I can imagine this is like the hardest part for Jairus. It's like, what are we doing? Like, my house is just down the road. Let's just go. Why are we talking about this? And Jesus switches the whole situation and focuses on the woman and then her need. And the issue for her, like, just to give a little bit of backstory, it wasn't totally a physical thing. She had this infirmity where she was bleeding for 12 years. But she was, still able to move around and do things. Her problem in this scenario is it wasn't physically ridiculous, but it was socially paralyzing for her. Being bleeding, she was constantly in a state of uncleanliness. And according to Torah, according to the law, there are particular states that if somebody's in, if they touch a body or if they're bleeding or if anything like that, there's certain things that if you do them, you're unclean. So you have to go through a process of becoming clean again. And while you're in that, you're socially removed. You can't really have a normal social life. So for 12 years, she was in a place where she was socially removed from the closest people in her life. Imagine that, like 12 years. So 2011 is 12 years ago. Imagine who you were in 2011, 12 years ago, and from that point to now, like imagine not actually having a meaningful relationship or talking or having a normal social life. What kind of person would you be? Like, how different would you be today? This isn't theoretical. This is the woman's life. She has gone 12 years. So, and you can imagine for her, it took a certain element, I think, of faith and boldness, like to go through the crowd. She sees Jesus, this teacher who's pretty renowned. He's been doing some miracles. He's famous. The synagogue leader, whose job was to reinforce the law and to teach it, and they're just standing there. Not to mention, to get to the crowd, she has to touch a lot of people, which would make all of them unclean. She had amazing sort of obstacles in her way. But she saw Jesus and said, it's worth it. I'm going to go for it. And she went through the crowd, and she did the whole thing. And I think it's cool, too. Jesus stops everything and asks, hey, who touched me? And nobody said anything. I think that there was a part of this woman that, maybe wanted to get in there. She got the healing. And then after that, maybe just keep it on the down low, go back, wait a few days, present herself to the rabbi, things like that. But Jesus in this scenario, I think it's so funny, he doesn't. He addresses the problem. In front of all the people, he talks about it. I think that's the real test of faith. Will this woman, come in front? Will she actually expose herself and say, this is what's going on? This is what happened. And I think that Jesus, part of even with us today, he doesn't want to just fix our exterior problems. He wants to get to the heart. That's why he wants us to actually talk about our lives, to live a life in the light, because he's not just working on the outside, he's trying to actually fix what's going on inside and mold and shape us. And so he goes that far with the woman, and he actually sort of outs her and he says, hey, who is it? I know it. And she noticed, hey, I can't go unnoticed. I've got to do something. I got to say it. And she comes forward and does it. And all the while, and so it's amazing. And even when he addresses her daughter at the end, what that kind of is saying is that he reinstated her into the community. That he did not just fix her ailment, he fixed everything. It was complete when she chose to really see what was going on and allow herself to allow light into her life. And switching back to Jairus a little bit, you can imagine him at this point as Jesus is having this conversation, and have you ever been in a scenario where you have a ride somewhere and they're in a really good conversation, but you got to go? You got to get out of here. You're hey, I'm glad that's happening, but we got to go. That has to be Jairus, but times 10,000 right now. He sees what's going on. This is good, but Jesus, my daughter, we've got to move. Now let's keep going. Verse 49. While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. And he said, your daughter is dead. He said, don't bother the teacher any longer. So you can imagine for Jairus, what little sliver of hope that there was, how crazy maybe Jesus could have done something, but maybe not. It was gone. This point was past the point of return. Verse 50. Hearing this, Jesus said, don't be afraid, just believe, and she will be healed. When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in except for Peter, James, and John, the child's father and mother, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. Stop wailing, Jesus said. She's not dead, but asleep. And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, my child, get up. Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, and he ordered them not to tell anyone what happened. So we see this incredible thing happen, and I love that phrase right there. When Jairus was in a place where it was man, it's past the point of nowhere. There's no hope for this situation. No one can do that. No one can raise someone from the dead. Jesus' response was just believe. Trust me. I got this. And my big point this morning is faith, authentic faith, real faith pushes through the crowd. That it's not pretending obstacles are not there, or they're smaller, or things like that, but choosing in spite of them to continue to act. Jairus and the woman saw their obstacles, I think, pretty clearly that were in front of them. And despite them, they still chose to get to Jesus or to bring him to somebody else, even while they're still there. And, I think there's something very incredible and beautiful about this whole story. Because for us as humans, like as people, we have an extremely limited view, I think, of the universe, the cosmos. We know some things, but to be honest, like, it's the tip of the iceberg. Like, we don't know. Like, we have a very limited view. And so being that, we don't know a hopeless scenario from a non-hopeless scenario. Like, we can't tell which one. In our perspectives, we can see something's bad, but we don't actually know. That is only God. And I love how Jesus tells him to just believe that in the midst of this ridiculous obstacle of his daughter, when it's too late, nothing can happen, he just says, I got this. And I think it's easy for us, today, like we can follow Jesus, make him the Lord of our life, the Lord of our money, relationships, our sexuality, take steps to bring him to people. Like, these are all, but I think when we do that, like when the obstacles then arise as we're doing all the good things, we can really ask ourselves, okay, is this working? Like, am I doing this right? Like, is this actually, should I be on this track? And Jesus is calling these people and us today, it's like, yes, in those scenarios, keep doing the good thing. Even in the face of obstacles, get to Jesus or bring him to someone. I can imagine the woman, she may have been thinking before this whole encounter, will I ever be in a state of cleanliness again? Will I ever be reinstated, overcome the mess of my life? I think today we can ask, will I ever overcome this sin? This thing that I've carried around for years? Will this ever be fixed? Come after Jesus with everything? Yes. He's saying that will absolutely be. Or on the flip side, Jairus, like, this situation is just too far gone. Like, hopeless. Like, they're not going to listen. No one's going to actually be able to change this. This bridge is burned. This situation is too far gone. The cards have been dealt. The game's over. Jesus' response, to just believe that Jesus will improve it. And we can't know what a hopeless situation looks like. We don't know. But we can know for certain that if we do have faith, if we see Jesus the way he's calling all these people to in the crowd, Jairus and the woman, if we see Jesus as the true master over nature and demons and sickness and death, the rest doesn't matter. Just get him to people or get to him. I think some fears we can wrestle with today, maybe Jairus as well, is, doubts. Will this actually make a difference? Will being with the church body consistently and going, will that actually make a difference in this? Maybe we can make excuses when something is, it's too much, it's not convenient, this is really hard, like I have a lot of other things that do need to get done. Will I still continue to make Jesus Lord? To still, in those moments, still trust him. Even I feel like taking time, we have busy lives today. Like, we're going everywhere. We have jobs, we have school, we have all these things. I love how Jesus, even going with the crowd, like, he was a busy guy. He was on a mission, yet he still took the time to stop and address the woman's needs and to talk to her. Maybe it's our timing. It's too late. This doesn't seem to be working. It never seemed to be working. Will you still continue to make Jesus Lord? I think it could have been easy also for Jairus to blame the crowd, to see things that were like, man, if this crowd just wasn't here, this would be so much easier. Or if this woman just waited one more day. She's had it for 12 years. Wow, she waited one more day? I can see him being tempted, to really think those things. Lack of time, lack of training, I feel like, or experience with something, like, can I actually handle this? Or even this straight up lack of faith, like, can this situation actually be overturned? What situations for you seem impossible in life? Think in your seat. Like, this isn't rhetorical, like, what seems really impossible? Is it someone you deeply love that you want to see make Jesus Lord, that you really want to bring Jesus into because of the impact that he's had on you? Or maybe it's a broken relationship that you feel like maybe it's just... Well, hello. It appears that we've had some technical difficulties with our video yesterday. So, let me finish up my thought. What in your life right now seems impossible? Whether it is someone that you love, making Jesus Lord, it could be a relationship where you think, man, those bridges are burned. I don't know what God could actually do with that. Or a sin that maybe through your life, you just can't seem to get rid of it. It crops back up. And think, this isn't rhetorical. where you are right now, think about what seems impossible. Because the truth is, with God, easy. Whatever we bring to the table, how hopeless, how too far gone with God, easy. Let's think about this. This kind of stuff is God's bread and butter. Like, think about any Old Testament story you remember, or if you were a VeggieTales kid growing up. Like, they all followed the same exact pattern. They would get themselves into trouble, or a pickle. Last dad joke of the sermon. And there'd be trouble, and then there's like, okay, what are we gonna do? This is hopeless. God. Every single time. They have no ability to change it. God does something amazing. And I think about Moses in the Red Sea. He gets to the Red Sea. It's like, the sea's here. What are we going to do? Pharaoh is bearing down on them. They have nowhere to go. He's got to take care of the people's needs. He has a whole nation next to him. What are we going to do? God shows up. They walk through the sea. Or Gideon. And I remember the story of Gideon where he has 32,000 troops. And God's kind of just like, you know what? Not inspiring. How about we take that down to 10,000? Or how about better yet, 300, and we split them up into 3 different parties, and then we'll raid this huge army of 10,000, and they do it, and they win, and God actually comes through. This is what God does. David and Goliath, a little guy, he's not a warrior, he's young, unseasoned, goes against a Philistine that by every right should be eating him for breakfast. But what happens? He goes out with the power of God and he wins. This is what God does. There is no scenario too far gone. It's not going to work. It's just too late. That doesn't exist. Honestly, the more hopeless it is, sometimes the better, because that just shows us that it's God doing it. Like, that God's going to be the one that actually shows up. Will you have the faith to let God show up? Whether it's getting to him or bringing him to someone else, will you look past the obstacles and go and let God do something awesome? Someone in history who I think a lot about when I think about obstacles is the guy, his name's Patrick of Ireland. Some of us will know him that grew up in more traditional churches as Saint Patrick, but his story is phenomenal. You might be thinking of someone like a monk, dressed in green, lives in a monastery, loves shamrocks. But the Patrick of history is an inspiring character. In fact, he actually grew up. We all think he's Irish. He wasn't Irish. Patrick was Roman. He was a Roman living in Britain. In the 5th century. And during that time, Britain would get raided by Ireland. If you don't know, Ireland is an island off the coast of Great Britain. And at this time, there was, the Irish were kind of like Vikings, kind of like pirates. They would go to Great Britain on the coast and they would raid. They would go and raid villages and steal and pillage and also kidnap. And this is what happened to Patrick when he was 16 years old. And also a man of not of faith, did not really believe or serve God. But when he was 16 years old, he got caught up by these pirates, by these raiders that took him back to Ireland. And he was sold into slavery. So for the better part of 6 years, he was a slave, working as a slave, being treated as you'd imagine a slave would be treated. But it was actually in kind of this milieu of this is a horrible circumstance. This is where he came to love God. And it's cool. There's a quote that he has that goes, "The love of God and his fear grew in me more and more, as did the faith. And my soul was roused so that in a single day, I said as many as 100 prayers, and in the night nearly the same." He wrote this thinking of his time when he was in Ireland, when he had, who knows, many obstacles. He didn't even know if his family was still alive. This guy, he was in a horrible situation, but it was in a horrible situation that God did something phenomenal. But the cool thing is, after 6 years, being away from home, being a slave in a nation that wasn't his, he actually found his way back. He escaped. He was able to get on a boat, go back to Great Britain. And this is where Patrick's story gets really cool. Because back at Great Britain, he grew. He grew spiritually as a leader. He became an extremely respected a leader in the Christian church. And he got a dream that he wasn't going to stay in Britain. But you know what? I'm going back to Ireland. Ireland was a pagan nation at the time. When he lived there, it was a pagan nation. And he said, we're going to go and we're going to bring Jesus. And there was countless obstacles. Even before he left, there was obstacles. Just, going over there. Like, people advised, don't go there. They're literally going to kill you. And he goes anyway. He gets to go ahead. He goes to Ireland, to a place that was dangerous, that was full of pagans, that there was really no Christian roots in a hopeless scenario. And God does something awesome. Within the next 100 years, during the life of Patrick, even afterward, the whole nation was flipped. They actually went from a pagan nation to now being a nation with Christian communities that weren't just there, but they were strong enough to raise up missionaries to send back to Britain. The church had a lot of things going on at this time that it was messy. And Ireland became kind of a shining hope to the world that sent missionaries back, all because one man chose to overlook the obstacles that were in front of him and have faith in spite of them, to go and to do the work, to bring Jesus to people. And also to not stop when opposition arose or when it got really hard, because it wasn't easy that whole time in Ireland. The one man changed the whole nation, and we still talk about him today. So closing, guys, think about this week. Where are you going to face obstacles? Because each one of us will. We will have obstacles this week. What is it going to look like to find Jesus through those obstacles, like the woman, or like Jairus, getting Jesus to somebody else? What obstacles are going to be in front of you? And what's it going to look like to have faith in spite of them? To have the resolution to cross over borders of or legitimate behavior. Like, what's it going to look like this week? So think about the obstacles, and guys, let's go out and have faith even though they're there. With that, guys, I hope you have a great week. And thank you for joining me in my home as I wrapped up the sermon.